and what kind of decisions had they been making? We didn't know. And in fact, as we worked on that video, we realized we didn't know much at all about how Valve operated. Not really. And so we spent the last 6 months doing that work, interviewing 16 former and current Valve employees about whether or not this structureless utopia with no bosses and no bureaucracy truly exists. You're gonna have to forgive me for spoiling the answer up front here, but in short, for some people, it does, sort of. I've spoken to employees who have loved working there, who truly believe in the vision and who describe Valve as a melting pot of some of the brightest minds in the games industry. But I've also spoken to others who've argued that although Valve may have a flat structure in theory, in reality, the power at Valve is anything but flat, leading to a workplace culture that 2 former employees compared to the Lord of the Flies.
Back off, man! I'm sick of your shit and so's my game!
Hiring, firing, and salary negotiations are all handled in an unconventional way, which I'm told has led to certain personality types and demographics benefiting much more than others. Now, you might argue that many businesses have fallen foul of that particular issue, but the thing you need to know about Valve is that even by games industry standards, it has a gigantic diversity problem. This is a company that has been unwilling or unable to hire people that properly reflect the world around it, despite the best efforts of some who've worked there over the years and who have pushed for change. And so, we're going to talk about the ways in which Valve's structure and its leadership have ultimately blocked that change.
The hot versus not hot pay gap. Yeah, Gaben paid the highest because he's the hottest. It's really fucked up. No one is talking about how hot Gaben is and why that factors into how much he gets paid out.
These problems became even more apparent following the murder of George Floyd in 2020, leading to a lot of internal discussion at Valve about race and culminating in a generous payout being made to each employee, allowing them to donate it as they saw fit. However, as you may have also noticed at the time, no public statement was made by Valve about Black Lives Matter, and it continues to be an employer of largely one demographic. We'll hear more about all of that.
Okay, I don't care about this stuff. All right.
In the second half of this video. But first, Valve is frankly unlike any other games company in the world.
Like, I do care about this concept, but I don't care about it right now as it pertains to my interests. My interests rely on the internal structure of Valve and how it factors into their lack of gaming. Does that make sense? Like, obviously, this is something I care about normally, diversity in companies and whatnot, but ultimately in this structure, in this story, I care more about, for my particular interest in narrative building, I care more about like what changed internally at Valve that led them to make the decisions they have, which is basically what I was talking about, which is that like there's no Half-Life 3, you know what I mean?
Let's talk about why. This is Valve's official employee handbook, first leaked in 2012 and then officially published for anybody to read. It is, at least partially, meant as a recruitment tool, describing Valve as the best place to work on Earth and detailing its structure, approach to pay, and of course, how every desk at Valve has wheels, allowing you to roll yourself and all your stuff to wherever you'd feel you'd be most valuable. I think all of this is a really useful demonstration of how, at least in 2012, Valve wanted to be perceived as a company. It's not just a job you'll have if you work there, it's a fearless adventure in knowing what to do when no one's there telling you what to do. Again, this is meant to encourage more people to work at Valve, so it wasn't exactly going to open with, don't work here, the aircon's always broken on the 14th floor, but there's something almost fanatic about the way in which it's written. So here's what I want to do. I want to go through this handbook some 10 years after it was published and tell you what it got right and what it got wrong according to the people we've spoken to. To do this, People Make Games has interviewed former and current employees of Valve under the condition of anonymity, allowing them to speak freely about their experiences without risking their careers, either within Valve or elsewhere. And so when you do hear quotes being read from those interviews, you'll instead be listening to voice actors that we've hired. Let's start right here. Welcome to Flatland. Now, to quote Valve directly, when you're an entertainment company that spent the last decade going out of its way to recruit the most intelligent, innovative, talented people on Earth, telling them to sit at a desk and do what they're told obliterates 99% of their value. 99%, that sounds like quite a lot. Take that, most video games companies. Most company org charts look something like this, right? You've got a bunch of employees down at the bottom here, all in different departments, doing different things, and they've got their own managers who've...
Many former Valve employees have talked about how at the end of the day, the compensation is directly tied to how profitable the work you do is, which makes things like upkeeping existing games a losing proposition for employees. I mean, that doesn't make sense considering that Valve has a tremendous amount of upkeep on games like CSGO because they are profitable. Like, what do you mean? I guess Team Fortress 2.
They've got their own managers and so on and so forth until you get right to the very top where a CEO
they make a game a decade. The fuck is this guy talking about? Yeah.
When anyone higher up makes a decision, that's then meant to trickle down through the ranks and be acted upon by the employees below. Now, Valve claims to be doing something totally different. Here, people don't have job titles and nobody's a manager, so instead of your typical hierarchy, it promises a flattened company structure in which employees are meant to be making their own decisions based on what they believe will benefit the company as a whole. Want to fix that problem that's aggravating you about Steam, or maybe throw around some ideas for a new Portal game, or perhaps you're interested in Steam VR? Well, the pitch here is that you can do any of those things. Just wheel your desk over to the relevant team, and if there isn't one, make your own.
When I worked there was this thing we would tell people when they'd come and talk to the company. We think we're the largest structuralist company in the world. At least within the games industry, I think that's definitely true.
We interviewed people all the time, and one of the goals was to understand if they could succeed in that type of environment. Not everyone can.
There's just as much structure as you might find in any other company of its size. The key difference is that the structure isn't written down in a way that it be.
They should wield their desk to the Half-Life 3 desk. Yeah. What are they? That's the problem. Some of the wheels have been busted for a while. They just simply haven't been able to wheel over to the Half-Life 3 desk. That's the issue.
Becomes immovable. People take on different roles that you would see at a traditional company, but those roles are temporary. It's not like you define your value over the entire course of your career there as just a project manager or whatever it is. You're not just one thing.
Valve can be this extremely attractive place to work as a result, with this inherent sense of freedom, great pay, an on-site gym filled with personal trainers, company vacations to Hawaii, and the opportunity to work on some of games' most beloved titles. But you need to be the right fit. That's something that came up time and time again in the interviews that we've had. And if you've watched our video on classism in the games industry, you know that that term just begs to be unpicked and scrutinized. Here's how the handbook puts it. If we start adding people to the company who aren't as capable as we are at operating as high-powered, self-directed, senior decision makers, then lots of the stuff discussed in this book will stop working. Whereas one former employee told me he believed there was even a maximum number of potential Valve employees spread across the globe right now, and that number is perhaps somewhere around 10,000 people.
Maybe that number is off by a factor of 2 or 4, but it's not off by a factor of 10 or 100.
I don't know that I've ever heard somebody in video games make that kind of claim before.
Okay, I don't even have... Okay, first of all, I don't even have an issue with this. You can throw up question marks all you want, but this is like... I don't know how much of this is just like straight marketing material to like hire people, but I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing. I think that is basically... No, it's not elitism either. I think it just shows... I think the original intention of Valve, remember, was supposed to be a cooperative corporation. And from that sense, it's not supposed to be purely profit-driven, but more so driven for survival. Now, of course, that hasn't happened. We know what Valve is now, but I think that stays from that has just like switched over from the former cooperative corporation structure. Because what that implies, if you're not like, I just see myself and how I operate. in the way that that is written and designed, like I don't have the consistent need for growth. You know what I mean? I'm not always like, oh man, I got to find new revenue strategies, like new ways to make money, hire some people and like expand and expand and expand. Like, and I get that. I you know, if you just, sometimes it should be okay to just have a structure that isn't designed around purely generating more profits. However, I think that's just an old holdover from the prior corporate culture that they had that is definitely not what Valve is today. Does that make sense? Because the Steam store has completely reshaped how Valve operates.
Only 0.0000125% of the world's entire population would have what it takes to work alongside them. It says something, I think, about Valve's company culture. It's the kind of thing you might expect a Silicon Valley employee to say, maybe, or, I don't know, a Navy SEAL.
You still have to come with the mental preparation that...
There are millions of people who can make a game as bad as Artifact.
allows you to get through difficult circumstances.
But for the time being, back to how all this works in practice. Let's say you work at Valve and you want to, I don't know, make a game about a quiet lad who runs around smacking disgusting crabs with his crowbar. Maybe you need an artist and a programmer to help get you started. And if that's the case, you'll usually need to go out into the rest of Valve and recruit the right people onto the project yourself. If you're able to convince those people to work on this thing with you instead of whatever it was that they were working on before, then great. Wheel all your desks together and get started. To begin with, everybody...
This part is really fucking weird, dude. I do find this very odd. The whole like desk thing. It's like a very anarchist structure. Dude, so what? Like, if you're not charismatic, how does that work? Especially when, like, what are these stem cells supposed to do? You know what I mean? If you're like a fucking STEM lord and you're not necessarily like a charismatic person, how the fuck are you gonna wheel and deal, you know? If you ain't got Riz, you're fucked. Yeah. Sounds like a classic tyranny of the structureless. You get this reverse feedback loop where the ad hoc structures that emerge work great for the people they work great for. So it becomes hard for them to want to change them for the people that they don't work well for.
He's necessarily leading the project, but let's say at some point you scale up and instead of 3 people working on this, there's 20. Who keeps everyone moving in the same direction? Because wait a minute, didn't we just say Valve doesn't do managers? The thing is, bigger projects like this do still need some sort of organization to function. They need what Valve describes as team leads. It's just these roles are meant to be more fluid than at other companies.
It isn't true to say there's no management at Valve. It's just there's no institutionalized management. There are some people at Valve, I'd say a small number of people, who are great natural managers. There are also people at Valve that have that de facto role but aren't necessarily great at it. And that's true at any company. It's just that at Valve, it's sort of a secret who's who. And so when people are bad managers, it can take a very long time for that to be addressed. Sometimes the way that...
Anarchist immediately going, so what? Why are prescribed structures holier than ad hoc structures? I didn't say that, but I think that there's still, leadership is still a necessity, in my opinion, to make stuff happen. For example, I'll give you a Slavoj Žižek example, even though he obviously is wrong on a lot of shit and a boomer and writes too much and is weird, but it's kind of like there is a tyranny that comes from making democratic decisions on every single minutia in your life. Like, for example, I don't want to fucking democratically vote on what kind of chemicals are utilized in the water supply. Like, I want to relegate that to the scientists that know best. Okay? Like, you would not be able to operate. No, I'm not talking about PFAS, okay? Obviously, that there is a point where that breaks. And in the United States of America, that point is long gone. But What I'm trying to fucking say here is that there are certain aspects of living in a social cohesive formation like a society that greatly benefit everyone and helps division of labor occur. And if every single aspect was hyper democratized, if every single aspect was, a direct democracy, you would just not be able to operate. You know what I mean?
That's addressed is the project goes down in flames, and that person...
How is that a good response? Your example was completely detached from the situation at hand. Well, I gave you an example of how direct democracy in every aspect of your existence fails to show you how direct democracy in this circumstance, direct democracy in every aspect of commodity production, can also lead to failure in a similar structure. What do you mean? This does not mean that, like, I don't believe in democracy in the workplace. Of course I do. But specialization must occur. And I'm more so a believer in voting in for managers and team leaders and ensuring that experts are still relied upon. Does that make sense? Because there's still socialists, by the way. Yeah, the only socialism in commodity production unironically comes from whatever your fucking personal understanding is. Flat fees overall. Everyone gets to do whatever the fuck they want to, and then nothing gets done. Yeah, there's no need for like workers' councils or anything like that because every man has his own boss, actually. Game dev here, you absolutely need leadership on large-scale projects. Work often has to be delegated across specializations and time zones. To be honest, if you're always in fucking meetings, you're never making a game. We talk about this as civil engineering. It's the idea that engineers would have to explain things they've studied for 10 plus years to people with no knowledge of the subject and convince them why they should spend money on it. Yeah.
doesn't become a de facto manager again.
Other employees I spoke to suggested that in most cases you do actually know who's leading the bigger projects because it's typically someone who's been at Valve for a long time, and so although it might not be written down anywhere, there is in fact a clear hierarchy in place. But let's think about some of the other things that managers are ordinarily responsible for. Hiring, firing.
A big part of why people hate managers is because they aren't experts. Voting in managers would be net same as them naturally arising in this situation. Yeah. And there is also still the downside of that where it's like, well, whichever the most charismatic team leader is will end up getting that position and not necessarily the person who's like the best equipped for the job. And I kind of see that. But ultimately, yes, forcing excessive voting is obstructionist. And I do agree with that. The issue is, I think there is no middle ground here where people literally look to their current corporate structure and think, oh, what you're doing is you want like a tyranny of the minority, just like the way that our unjustifiable hierarchy operates in our current work structure. And that's not what I'm saying at all. There needs to be an element of democratization there for sure with how profits get, how profits get shared, with more autonomy in your workplace, in your work hours, because you know your work structure better than anyone else does. Currently, that is entirely controlled by people who never fucking touch your job at all and don't give a shit and see you as completely replaceable nodes, right? But That's not what I'm advocating for, obviously, when I say this. What I'm basically saying is that you can have an element of democratization without having every aspect of it be relegated back to individuals that are working on the project.
Performance reviews and salary negotiations. You know what? I'm going to jump straight to that last one because I think it's really important to understand about Valve. Let's talk about stat ranking. If you've heard of this concept before, it might be in relation to Microsoft, who used its own version of stat ranking to measure the performance of its employees from sometime around the early 2000s to 2013, by which point it had become an intensely controversial practice within the company. Valve's co-founders, Gabe Newell and Mike Harrington, were both ex-Microsoft, it's worth pointing out. But it's not a one-for-one comparison. Valve stat ranking is very much its own thing. Here's how it works. Typically, a starting salary at Valve has been described to me as being extremely competitive for a video games gig, but also when compared to the likes of Amazon and Microsoft, who both have headquarters close to Valve's own in Bellevue, Washington. And this salary that you start with is then adjusted annually via what's known as the stat ranking process, although COVID has gotten in the way of this in more recent years. In a typical year, however, from about October onwards, employees are invited into meetings with a handful of other co-workers in which they're asked to evaluate the performance of several of their other colleagues based on 4 separate metrics: skill level, productivity, group contribution, and product contribution. You can read Valve's own definitions for each of these in the employee handbook.
Mostly everybody participates in the ranking, if they want to participate. We generally have groups of 4 to 6 people in each meeting, and usually they're ranking 10 employees at a time. Those 10 employees being ranked are generally all people that those in the meeting have worked with through the year.
Once enough of these meetings have taken place, everybody at Valve should have been ranked by at least 2 separate groups, meaning that you end up with this giant list of every single employee at the company ranked in order by how highly their peers have rated them. Valve then uses that list to sort all of the employees into different bandings. So here's everyone that's overperforming, here's everyone that met expectations, and here are the folks that are currently underperforming.
They were somewhat stressful meetings in terms of, ranking people. It's stressful, but I can't think of a single time where I felt like people were being dishonest or had some kind of agenda or something.
Corporate MMR? Oh, Jesus. That's kind of wild.
We tried to be detached from any personal feelings and be objective.
It was awkward because you had to rank your peers, but actually I think the exercise made sense to the people coming out of the room.
I think, as with a lot of things at Valve, it's very easy for the people who work really well inside these systems to brush aside concerns about them, because it's true that for a lot of people, if they have a certain type of personality, they're probably doing very well. It's not apparent to them the effect it has on people.
Oh my God. I'm 2-0ing you right now? This is insane. Why are you seeing everyone? This is kind of fucked up. And also, you met Simu Liu and you talked about me, but did you talk about me with Dua Lipa? That's the real question. This is the same chatter that met Simu yesterday. Fucked up. Have fun, I guess. Great.
People who have a different psychological profile or a different level of perceived security within the company.
In January, employees then receive an automated email from Valve President Gabe Newell that says, hey, this is your new salary and here's how much you're getting paid as a bonus. I'm told, more recently at least, that those bonuses have calmed down in favor of higher salaries, but in the past, it wasn't unheard of for that bonus to be the equivalent of your entire salary in one go if you performed really highly and if the company has had a particularly profitable year. Alternatively, if you've ranked poorly, then you may find that you're now getting paid less as a result. Although almost everyone I spoke to said that trying to figure out the exact relationship between your performance that year and these numbers that you've ended up with is surprisingly tricky.
You never knew what that meant. All you knew was I got a bonus that was really great last year, but then this year it's half as good. Does that mean I did way worse? Does it mean the company hasn't done as well this year and so bonuses are lower?
From the conversations I've had, this layer of mystery surrounding pay seems to come from 2 separate directions. On one hand, you've got Valve as a company deciding that stat ranking just works best when they don't then explain their working out at the end of the process. One former employee believed that by doing this, it stopped people from trying to game the system too much.
I think the best possible way to do this would be not only improve base pay, have one separate bonus. I mean, I'm looking at it from the outside, right? So it's different. But there would be two different types of bonuses. One bonus based on literally just overall company profits that increases, that's like directly tied to the company expanding, directly tied to the company making more money, regardless of what team you're a part of. And then a secondary bonus that is tied to the amount of profit that you're generating for the company individually. And this way, there's more of a sense of ownership over all of the products in the company. And then also simultaneously allows certain parts of the company to focus on long-term projects that don't require don't yield immediate returns on investment, and investment in the way of profits, like short-term profits in this circumstance. But if you're coupling workers' bonus with the value that they generate, how can you exploit them? Great example I can give you is people that work on the back end or people that work to keep the company going that don't immediately yield benefits in a way that managers and the people that are trying to identify mathematically how much value that they're generating are oftentimes going to be left behind. Like IT, janitors, you know what I mean? Or even people that are working on older games and you know, keeping those older games, keeping those older, no longer as profitable, seemingly profitable pieces of IP running. People that run the fucking servers, things like that. People that do bug fixes for old games. These are going to be profoundly important parts of a company that don't immediately yield profits. Which is precisely the reason why you have to somehow keep them around, even though they're not generating sales for new projects and new products. The kind of people Elon would fire. Exactly. Like, look at Twitter. The reason why it's a massive fucking failure is because Elon Musk went in and fired most of the workforce. And that's why you keep running into issues when he's like, oh yeah, I'm going to do a fucking audio-only campaign announcement for Ron DeSantis. 600,000 people click into that, and it fails instantaneously. Why? Because you fired everybody, dumbass. You don't know who's doing the cleanup. There are so many parts of a company that's literally working and not necessarily working to immediately generate value for you. Does that make sense? It's very stupid.
And on the other hand, there's confusion because Valve employees just don't really talk to each other about their salaries and compare notes.
American culture doesn't like talking about how much we're getting paid. You might talk with some of your closer friends about, like, did you get what you expected? But you never really talk about the specific numbers.
A few of the women did after some of us quit. And then it was more of the case of, holy they should definitely have paid you more.
We'll have more to say on gender and diversity issues at the company later on in this video. Interestingly, any Valve employee can log onto Steam's dashboard and see exactly how much revenue the company has earned through that marketplace whenever they like. That can be for a specific game or region,
oh my
or
God.
just generally.
It's like, dude, the guys running the CSGO gambling schemes are just like coming in fucking Bugattis. They're just rolling up to work in Bugattis every goddamn day, dude. And it shows in the fucking marketplace too. They're like, holy fuck, dude. You want to know why? You want to know why they're not making Half-Life 3? Because the desk for the CSGO gambling is so big. Everybody fucking wheeled over there. They got gold wheels. Okay? I'm just glad that somebody wheeled their ass over to the fucking Steam Deck side, okay? It's such... God, I love the Steam Deck so much. I'm sorry. I hate glazing a company, but it is truly a revolutionary piece of tech, for me at least. It gives me so much joy.
How much money did Steam make this year? And a couple of people I spoke to used that as a sort of litmus test for trying to decipher exactly what their pay packet meant and where in the ranking they might have landed. But all speculation aside, what everyone knows is this.
What are you playing on it? Currently, I'm playing Yakuza Kiwami 2. I'm playing through each individual Yakuza release right now, and it's so fucking good.
The opinion of your co-workers has the potential to dramatically affect the way in which you're being compensated.
I've seen people who, by their nature, don't give a shit.
I did fight the babies. It was so funny. What was it? The title of that side quest is so stupid. Yes, I fought a bunch of babies. Be my baby. Yeah, be my baby. The be my baby side mission. Hey, even though we live in a capital shithole, Chipotle and Steam providing us with burrito bowls and handheld consoles makes everything worth it. I mean, I didn't say that, but if you can't change the structure, you might as well at least take advantage of some of its amenities, is the way I see it.
And say, I'm just going to work on the things I enjoy, and I trust that in the end, if I'm doing good work, it'll be fine. There are also plenty of people who, when faced with the dynamics of this, think, oh God, I better make sure I'm working on things that are perceived to be valuable.
A lot of people, including myself, did put a lot of weight on this throughout the year, so decisions that you made were through the lens of, how am I going to be ranked against my peers at the end of the year? And this did have the effect of a lot of people making short-term decisions. You know, I don't want to spend 3 years with a shit ranking because I'm working on some long-term project that may or may not pay off.
One of the most interesting ways you could see it seeping in was when people specifically did riskier projects near the beginning of the year, and then they'd go back to the more well-known ones as it gets closer to review time. Because recency bias would make people focus on that stuff.
I've heard a number of pros and cons when it comes to Valve stat ranking. On one hand, there's an argument that it helps incentivize some of the less enticing work to actually get done. Remember, this is a company that says you get to pick what you'd like to do. Well, if that's the case, you know, surely there's going to be some more boring or...
What if the amount of money that the game you worked on generated dictated how much money your next game got? So you have to play more, you have some play money and people who make shitty games don't? Well, the problem is, when we're talking about something that is subjective, because video games are still art, an artistic medium, ultimately. I know that's going to be laughable for a lot of people, but it's the same as fucking movies. You run into the problem of, well, maybe some games are not going to generate as much fucking revenue, but it doesn't really matter. Because ultimately, they're making games that are really good. They're barely art too. Yeah, the reason why you think movies and video games are fucking not art is because of the profit-seeking structure that we're talking about. It absolutely is art. You don't perceive it as such because everything is just fucking shitty DLCs and skins. All of these things are, you know, profit-driving incentives that have made all of these things. They've turned it into just, you know, money machines rather than something that is supposed to make you feel something.
You know, less jazzy work that might get left to one side if it weren't for the fact that by stepping up and doing it, you may then get a bump when it comes to your stat ranking score later down the line. People might say, hey, that person was a team player.
The irony is all of these people now, like most gamers now recognize that independent games are where it's at. Right? Indie games are where it's at. I wonder why. I wonder why indie games are often so, like, I mean, they're so cherished and celebrated, especially before they get sucked into the massive corporate scheme. I don't know why. I wonder how that keeps happening. Clearly, my man hasn't played Yakuza 0. It's art. No, I love Yakuza games. Yakuza games have revitalized my, reinvigorated my love for, like, single-player games. I forgot that people used to make and still make single-player games that are just, like, replayable, are vast, expansive. It's incredible. It's so fucking good. It is absolutely so good. Because all of the side quests are playable. All of the side quests are awesome. Because they're not woke. First of all, the Yakuza games are incredibly woke, ironically. Bro, there's literally trans people. There's a trans person in Yakuza 2. Like, one of the side quests is Earth Angel, which is a bar in the in Kamurocho, but technically it's actually Golden Guy, Champion District. And it's run by a mama who is trans. And one of the missions, one of the side missions, the first side mission is literally to beat the shit out of a transphobic person who is actually a chaser who turns out is just simply negging the trans lady. Like, and this game was made years ago. Trans mamas is a common Japanese trope. Yeah, okamis. But I know, but I'm just saying that, like, it's funny to think that it's, like, not a fucking woke game or whatever. Are you playing in sub or dub? I didn't even know there was a dubbed version available. No, I've only been playing Japanese. Oh yeah, it was fucking made in like 2000. The Okama, or is it Okami? Okama? I don't know. Yakuza 7 is like the most pro-sex worker leftist game ever. Yeah, the Yakuza games have like incredible politics in many ways. It's really strange to see. It was certainly unexpected. Because, like, I don't really look to... Whenever I talk about Japan, I often just overlook Japanese cultural and social politics. I try to not talk or think about that. But Yakuza certainly is very good on that front. Which is not even something I expect when I play video games. Like, make no mistake, I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, it has to have... The video game I play has to reflect my worldview, blah, blah, blah. Like, I hate that shit. I don't give a fuck. But it's a nice extra seasoning.
This year. And alongside that, quite a few of the people I interviewed believed that it's no bad thing for Valve employees to be prioritizing work that is perceived as valuable to the company, because if you're grinding away on project after project that ultimately ends in disaster, then perhaps you shouldn't also be entitled to such a large slice of the pie. But here's an important question. What exactly does valuable mean to Valve? Does it mean financial success? That's certainly part of it. If you've helped ship Half-Life Alyx, perhaps that's something that can be partially quantified in terms of sales and revenue targets. That's not going to be the whole picture, but it's certainly a factor. However, when it comes to some of this other stuff listed in the handbook section on stat ranking, like how much has your coworker contributed to studio process, hiring, integrating people into the team, etc., well, suddenly that's a different kind of judgment call. What's valuable in this case depends much more on personal taste, or to put it another way, personal biases. I can't tell you how many women work at Valve, or people of color, or non-binary folks, or those who identify as LGBTQ, or disabled people, because, well, Valve is a private company.
It's comfortable.
Actually, given we've just discussed hiring, let's turn our attention to the other end of the spectrum as well. I do think all of this contributes to Valve's issues with diversity. There are certain barriers here which are just harder to overcome if you don't fit this mold that Valve has always had. Now, it's hard to overstate the financial success that Valve has enjoyed over the years. Again, this is a private company, so we don't have the figures to hand, but multiple employees describe Steam's enormous revenues as having completely changed the trajectory of Valve Corporation. I'm told that Valve would almost certainly
This is
have
the
shipped
most
more
interesting
games,
part.
not necessarily better ones, but definitely more, had it adopted a traditional company structure that doesn't allow employees to walk or roll away from projects as easily. But ultimately, Steam's success has meant Valve's income has not been dependent on the next game it ships in a very long time. As a result, more than one employee described landing a job at Valve as like getting tenure at a university. Valve's business model and rich war chest of funds makes it a very different kind of employer that has the potential to allow its employees to do very different things that they may find harder to justify at, say, a publicly listed company or somewhere that's hemorrhaging money between new products being shipped. And so when it comes to taking big, ambitious swings at projects with harder to quantify returns on investment, Valve has been able to step boldly into the world of virtual reality and hardware manufacturing, but employees say that that same belief, that same trust, isn't also being applied to making Valve a more diverse employer.
If it's an issue that the people in power also understand fully, then they make all sorts of accommodations. So stuff like parental leave. I think the people in power can understand that having a kid is hard, and so we should give people 6 months time off. But should we make it easier for people of color to join the company? They'll just be like, why? I feel like that's the dividing line. They are really, really good for employees for things they really understand.
Some of this frustration spilled out into a wider discussion within the company after the murder of George Floyd in early 2020, as a group of employees within Valve pushed for the company to make a public statement in support.
Okay, this stuff is not about what kind of projects that they're working on, so I'm not going to watch the rest of it. But I honestly feel like the old style corporate bureaucracy, Bell Labs, Xerox, actually fostered innovation and creativity more than Valve's decentralized popularity. Like Bell Labs literally just hired smart people and let them fuck around because the managers have no idea what the fuck they're doing. Biden is on cocaine today.